Most people believe that earning a high income and keeping a steady job automatically guarantees long-term financial security. The world teaches that when your harvest expands, your spending should expand immediately to match every single coin. The Bible does not call consuming your entire harvest prosperity. Ancient wisdom calls living without margin sheer vulnerability. Consider the modern professional who earns a generous salary, yet spends every dollar before the month concludes. A sudden corporate downsizing occurs, and within 30 days, that polished lifestyle collapses under the weight of bills. Or consider the independent contractor who celebrates record client revenue, presuming next month will bring identical abundant rains. One major client departs, cash flow ceases instantly, and emergency debt becomes the only bridge to survive. Or picture the family facing an unpredicted medical emergency, watching years of hard work vanish in a week. These crises did not originate from low earnings, but from the dangerous assumption that summer never ends. When you consume 100% of your income, you build your house upon shifting sand. Proverbs warns that the prudent see danger approaching and prepare, while the simple keep going and suffer. Financial fragility is not a math problem. It is a structural failure of living without intentional margin. You can earn multiple figures and still remain exactly one unexpected crisis away from total personal bankruptcy. Ancient scripture recorded a counter-cultural economic blueprint thousands of years ago to deliver households from this trap. It began not with complex investments, but with a non-negotiable 20% reserve mandated before famine arrived. Let us examine the ancient text written in Genesis chapter 41, verse 34 through 36. Pharaoh received a troubling dream of 7 fat cows devoured by 7 lean, gaunt cows rising from the river. Joseph interpreted the vision not merely as a supernatural warning, but as a practical mandate for disciplined preparation. He instructed Egypt to appoint commissioners and take 1/5 of every harvest during the 7 years of plenty. 1/5 is exactly 20%, not 10%, not a vague surplus, but a structured, non-negotiable reserve. Notice the exact timing of this mandate. The storage began when fields were overflowing and grain seemed limitless. Human nature wants to consume more when abundance increases. Wisdom forces the granary doors open during harvest. Most people read Genesis 41 as an ancient government policy or an agricultural tax for a distant empire. That shallow reading misses the eternal financial truth. Counter-cyclical discipline must be established before the drought begins. If you do not save 20% when income is plentiful, you will have 0% when seasons shift. The scripture says, "This stored grain became a reserve for the land, so that the nation would not perish." The farmer who eats all his seed during summer has nothing to plant or eat when winter freezes the ground. Joseph did not invent modern economics. He revealed God's design for human stewardship in an unstable world. The 20% rule is not about depriving yourself today. It is about purchasing peace of mind for tomorrow. Before we divide this reserve into practical portions, we must clarify what biblical wisdom is not. First, this ancient reserve rule is not a get-rich-quick scheme designed to bypass patient labor and daily diligence. Second, this is not a prosperity gospel formula, claiming that setting aside money forces God to make you wealthy. Biblical stewardship is about faithfulness and obedience, not manipulating divine favor for selfish luxury or careless ease. Third, this is not specific investment advice, stock trading tips, or a replacement for licensed financial counsel. The worldly culture trains the human heart to worship immediate appearance rather than enduring spiritual and practical stability. Proverbs observes that one person pretends to be rich, yet has nothing, while another pretends to be poor. Living at the edge of your income creates a hollow facade that shatters at the first sudden trial. When income rises by 20%, household expenses mysteriously rise by 25% to devour the new margin. We upgrade our houses, vehicles, and wardrobes not out of true necessity, but to match our peers. This cycle of comparison drains the storehouse before the grain can even be gathered into the safety vaults. Jesus warned clearly that a person's true life does not consist in the abundance of their worldly possessions. Scripture does not say money is evil, but that the craving and love of money pierces the soul. Building a 20% reserve is first an internal surrender, breaking the idol of immediate consumption and pride. Now that our foundation is clear, let us examine how to structure this ancient reserve into 6 pillars. Before dividing your harvest, you must ruthlessly confront how modern society normalizes living on the absolute edge. Consider the corporate specialist who earns 6 figures, yet relies on next Friday's deposit to pay basic rent. On paper, they appear prosperous. In reality, their margin is zero, and their vulnerability is complete. When high income meets zero savings, panic becomes the quiet companion of every monthly billing cycle. Consider next the small business owner whose revenue grows yearly, yet whose cash reserves remain completely empty. Every dollar earned is immediately reinvested or spent, leaving no cushion when market demand shifts suddenly. Or picture the young family making payments on 2 vehicles, a home, and endless subscription services. One sudden reduction in household working hours forces them to borrow money just to buy groceries. Proverbs 21, verse 20 says, "The wise store precious treasure, but fools swallow every single piece down." Now pause and ask yourself 4 direct diagnostic questions to measure the health of your household storehouse. First question: if your primary income stopped today, how many months could your household survive without debt? Second question: if your essential work tools broke tomorrow, could you replace them with cash immediately? Third question: if a major economic downturn struck your industry, would you panic or stand secure? Fourth question: when someone in your community suffers severe loss, do you have surplus prepared to give? If these questions expose weakness, Joseph's ancient 20% blueprint provides the exact structural solution you need. The first portion of Joseph's 20% blueprint is the liquid margin, the immediate defense against daily life shocks. Before you think about investing, expanding, or growing, you must build an untouchable barrier of immediate living cash. This is not speculative money. This is pure defensive capital, held in absolute safety and instant readiness. In the parable of the 10 virgins, 5 were called wise because they took extra oil in jars. The extra jar did not make the lamp burn brighter immediately. It guaranteed the lamp never went out. Consider a classroom teacher whose vehicle transmission fails unexpectedly during the middle of the school term. With a liquid margin, that repair is a minor inconvenience. Without it, the emergency becomes high-interest credit card debt. Or consider the independent delivery driver who faces 2 weeks of illness without incoming client payments. The liquid reserve covers food, shelter, and utilities quietly, protecting the family from panic and humiliation. But heed this solemn warning: never lock your liquid defense in high-risk ventures or illiquid speculative assets. The goal of this foundational pillar is survival and peace of mind, not maximum financial return on capital. Wisdom dictates storing between 3 to 6 months of basic living expenses before chasing new investments. When your household possesses this liquid margin, you work without panic and make decisions from strength, not desperation. Make this non-negotiable. Divert your first reserve dollars here until the foundation is fully solid and secure. Once your liquid shield is firmly established, you are ready to construct the second pillar: capital replacement. The second portion of Joseph's 20% blueprint is the capital replacement fund, the deliberate protection of your working tools. Every vehicle, laptop, machine, and physical instrument you use to generate income is constantly deteriorating toward inevitable failure. Proverbs chapter 27, verses 23 and 24 warns that earthly wealth and productive assets do not last forever. Solomon instructs us to know the condition of our flocks, because productive machinery requires constant, intentional maintenance. Consider an independent plumber whose work van engine fails suddenly in the middle of a busy contracting season. If he has no capital replacement fund, he is forced into high-interest debt just to keep operating. Consider a digital video editor whose primary editing workstation motherboard unexpectedly burns out during a major project. Or picture the local baker whose commercial oven breaks, threatening the entire daily livelihood of her family bakery. The immature worker acts shocked when essential equipment wears out, calling natural physical depreciation an unforeseen crisis. The wise steward understands that depreciation is a mathematical certainty, not an unexpected mystery of the universe. Here is the critical warning. Never mix your tool replacement reserve with your general household emergency living cash. If you drain your emergency fund to buy new machinery, you leave your family completely undefended against disaster. Calculate the expected lifespan of every major tool you own, divide the cost monthly, and store that capital systematically. When equipment eventually breaks, you simply purchase a replacement in cash without stress, hesitation, or taking on debt. With your tools defended, you are ready to explore the third pillar, the strategic opportunity granary. The third portion of Joseph's 20% blueprint is the strategic opportunity granary, capital prepared for sudden value. Most people view savings purely as defense, but ancient wisdom also reserves capital to seize extraordinary historical moments. Genesis 41 verses 48 and 49 records that Joseph gathered and stored grain in every surrounding city. The grain was stored so abundantly that Egypt ceased measuring, creating unmatched financial leverage during the upcoming collapse. When economic dislocations strike an industry, assets and essential goods are sold at massive discounts by distressed sellers. Consider a real estate manager who watches property values drop during a recession while holding cash reserves. While others panic and liquidate assets, the prepared investor buys productive land at generational discounts without debt. Or picture an independent retailer purchasing surplus inventory from closing suppliers for pennies on the dollar. He transforms another company's liquidation into massive inventory margins because his liquidity was already prepared and waiting. Consider a media professional buying high-grade production rights when competitors rush to cut operational costs. Yet hear this solemn warning: do not disguise impulsive gambling and foolish speculation as strategic opportunity. Proverbs chapter 24 teaches that by wisdom a house is built, and through knowledge its rooms are filled. Opportunity capital requires tremendous patience, sitting untouched for years until the genuine biblical season of harvest arrives. Allocate a measured share of your reserve to this fund, refusing to deploy it on hasty trends. With opportunity capital secured, we now turn to the fourth pillar, the cyclical famine shield. The fourth portion of Joseph's 20% blueprint is the cyclical famine shield, protection against extended macroeconomic winters. A car repair lasts a week, but historical recessions, industry shifts, and structural droughts can endure for entire years. Joseph did not prepare for a single bad harvest. He built storage massive enough to endure 7 lean seasons. Genesis 41 verse 30 warns that 7 years of famine will arise, and all the abundance will be forgotten. When the ground yields no rain for multiple seasons, only households with deep structural reserves survive without losing their freedom. Consider a commercial construction builder whose entire local market halts during a prolonged economic recession and credit crunch. Or picture a seasonal photographer who earns 80% of annual revenue in 4 summer months alone. Or consider the agricultural trader who faces unexpected crop blight, needing 2 years of buffer to replant safely. Without a cyclical shield, you are forced to sell your skills at desperate discounts to survive winters. Here is the vital warning. During abundant years, your mind will trick you into believing famine is impossible. Ecclesiastes chapter 3 teaches that there is an appointed time for everything and a season for every activity. You must build a separate cyclical reserve dedicated entirely to sustaining your household through long economic freezes. Determine the historical cycle of your trade, calculate a 1-year baseline survival runway, and fill that granary steadily. When market winters arrive, your household remains calm, unhurried, and completely free from desperate or compromising decisions. With self-preservation established, we now elevate our stewardship to the fifth pillar, the prepared generosity store. The fifth portion of Joseph's 20% blueprint is the prepared generosity store, deliberate capital reserved to bless others. Most people give impulsively from whatever loose coins remain, but biblical generosity is a structured, intentional storehouse. Proverbs chapter 11 teaches that one person gives freely and grows richer, while another withholds and suffers want. Paul reminded believers of Jesus' own words, "It is far more blessed to give than to receive." Joseph's storage did not merely preserve Egypt. It opened its gates to feed desperate nations across the ancient world. Consider a family dentist who maintains a dedicated monthly reserve to provide free reconstructive surgery for low-income patients. Or picture a local grocer who sets aside 10 food boxes weekly for elderly widows facing rising inflation. Or an accountant who dedicates 5 hours monthly to counsel young families trapped in predatory payday loan debt. When giving is built into your reserve structure, you give without fear, resentment, or compromising your family's basic needs. Hear this vital warning: never borrow money or compromise your household's baseline defense to perform emotional acts of charity. 2 Corinthians teaches that each person should give what they decided in their heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion. Setting aside a dedicated giving percentage every month transforms charity from an irregular burden into a joyful discipline. Create a separate sub-account for generosity. Deposit into it first from every harvest and release it with gladness. Generosity transforms money from a ruthless master into an obedient servant, breaking the spirit of fear and selfishness. With generosity established, we complete our structural storehouse with the final pillar, the generational seed. The sixth and final portion of Joseph's 20% blueprint is the generational seed, capital preserved for your descendants. True stewardship looks beyond your personal lifetime, planting financial and spiritual trees under whose shade you may never sit. Proverbs chapter 13, verse 22, declares that a good person leaves an enduring inheritance to their children's children. Joseph did not merely preserve Egypt during his life. He secured land and peaceful continuity for future generations. Consider a veteran orchard farmer who plants olive trees that require 20 years before producing their richest harvest. He does not plant for immediate consumption today, but to ensure his grandchildren inherit fertile and debt-free soil. Consider a master craftsman passing a debt-free workshop, specialized tools, and established commercial reputation to his apprentices. Or an independent business founder structuring an employee ownership succession plan that outlives her own career. Or parents funding vocational education and debt-free foundations, equipping children to produce rather than merely consume. Yet heed this grave warning: passing sudden wealth to undisciplined heirs without character guarantees their swift destruction. Proverbs chapter 20, verse 21 warns that an inheritance gained too hastily will not be blessed at the end. If you leave money without teaching biblical diligence, you leave a curse disguised as an unearned fortune. Build generational reserves into income-producing assets, productive real property, and deep wisdom rather than hoard cash piles. When you cultivate the generational seed, your family line builds upon strength rather than constantly restarting from zero. We have now uncovered all 6 pillars. Let us study the ants' timeless discipline that sustains them. A blueprint of 6 pillars is completely useless without the internal discipline required to store grain day after day. For this reason, King Solomon points our attention away from royal courts directly to the smallest creature. Solomon commands us to observe the ant, study its instinctive habits, and discover true self-governing financial wisdom. Proverbs chapter 6 says the ant has no commander, overseer, or ruler, yet stores its provisions in summer. Notice the defining characteristic of the ant. It needs no boss standing over its shoulder demanding it to save. The immature person saves only when terrified by crisis. The wise person saves through systematic, automatic, daily habit. The ant does not gather the entire harvest in one heroic leap. It carries one small grain at a time. When you receive a bonus, promotion, or unexpected profit, resist upgrading your lifestyle and store 20% immediately. True financial maturity means you do not need an economic catastrophe to force you into saving your harvest. The sluggard waits for tomorrow. The ant acts in summer because it recognizes that summer is strictly temporary. When the summer ends and cold rains arrive, the undisciplined person discovers that good intentions do not feed families. Heed this warning. Do not rely on fragile daily willpower. Construct automated structures that save before you spend. When your 20% reserve operates automatically, consistency becomes effortless, quiet, and completely protected from emotional spending. Adopt the spirit of the ant. Work diligently today, store quietly today, and welcome tomorrow without fear. There is a massive distinction between storing grain out of faithful obedience and hoarding wealth out of selfish pride. Jesus told the parable of a wealthy landowner whose fields produced so abundantly that his barns overflowed. Instead of distributing surplus to bless his community, he tore down his barns to build bigger private storage. He said to his soul, "You have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry." God said to him, "You fool, this very night your soul will be demanded back from you." Joseph built granaries to serve and preserve others. The rich fool built barns to isolate and indulge himself. Joseph's reserve was held with an open hand before God. The rich fool's hoard was gripped with closed fists. Consider a modern founder who accumulates millions, yet hoards every dollar behind defensive trusts, refusing to help anyone. He lives in perpetual terror of losing his net worth, discovering that stored wealth without purpose creates prison walls. Or picture an investor who measures self-worth purely by spreadsheet balances, completely detached from family, community, and faith. Money stored purely for self-indulgence breeds spiritual rot, isolating the heart from God and starving the human soul. Scripture does not condemn the size of the storehouse. Scripture condemns the idolatrous worship of the storehouse. Paul instructed Timothy to command the wealthy not to be arrogant or set their hope on uncertain riches. Store your 20% with a posture of open stewardship, recognizing that every grain belongs entirely to God. Now let us return to our final synthesis, sealing this ancient reserve wisdom for your life and family. The world asks every morning, "How much can I consume today?" Biblical wisdom asks, "How much must I store?" Joseph's 20% rule is not an ancient relic. It is God's enduring defense for your household today. When you build these 6 reserve pillars, you escape financial panic and walk in quiet, enduring freedom. Begin today with your very next income, setting aside the first fifth before lifestyle expands to consume it. If this teaching strengthened your household today, subscribe to join us as we explore timeless biblical wisdom together. The foolish swallow all they earn today. The wise store their harvest in peace, honoring God in every season.